India and New Zealand have concluded a comprehensive free trade agreement.
Why trade deals are never just about trade? How come New Zealand is opposing its own trade deal with India? What's the real dispute behind this, and how economic gains would be balanced against political resistance? Free trade agreements are never about the free trade, and the new India-New Zealand FTA is a textbook example where we get to see how domestic politics and sensitive sectors like dairy and labour market fears are the ones which shape international economic diplomacy. Hello everyone, welcome to Vajram and Ravi's Flash News. My name is Shubhangi Singh, and today we are going to understand not just India and New Zealand's FTA, but also what are the concerns around it that the Foreign Minister of New Zealand has decided and vowed to work against it in the Parliament. So let us start by understanding that what exactly lies in front of us. So recently, this very Monday, India and New Zealand have come up with a FTA and they have finalized the negotiation in the form of comprehensive free trade agreement. Now, these free trade agreements that India has been recently signing up, these are of immense importance because of the rising global uncertainty that we see across the globe and the increasing global protectionism as well. That countries are closing up, they are hiking up the tariffs to protect their own, and the global free trade is threatened because of that. Other than that, US tariff escalation has been seen, and we don't know where it is going to go, especially under President Donald Trump, and that is why India has been negotiating parallel trade deals with US and Canada, and in this environment, coming through with the negotiations with New Zealand is important. Now, in this regard, both of the Indian Prime Minister has remarked it as significant and also historic milestone, where New Zealand PM has also marked it wide-ranging and significant as well. However, the problem has come via domestic politics, where the Foreign Minister of the New Zealand has gone ahead and marked that this free trade agreement is neither free nor fair for New Zealand. Now we will be trying to decipher all the layers around it, starting with understanding the details around India and New Zealand trade itself. So when we are talking about India and New Zealand trade, we have to understand that this free trade agreement, the whole idea around it is to primarily enhance and deepen the bilateral trade and investment between the countries and allow better market access for goods and services and strengthen long-term economic cooperation with each other. So if you look at the given diagram, you will be able to see that over the years, we have been very consistent in terms of goods trade, and as of now as well, as if you see the data, it is for April to October, it is something that there is no huge trade surplus or trade deficit for either of the country. That is a very promising place to start with, because whenever a country is facing a trade deficit, signing up or negotiations of FTA become harder. For example, India-US. In this context, this FTA that has come through, this will facilitate trade flow, this will facilitate investment, this will facilitate linkages around investment as well, and strengthen supply chain and address market access of the goods. And the main key exports of India being drug formulation, biologicals, petroleum products, cotton fabrics made up, motor vehicles, ready-made garments, highlighted that how important these sectors are from the perspective of exports, not just for New Zealand, but for also the other countries. So in this context, when we have got the free trade agreement, which will give us duty-free access, that means our prices will be more competitive in the export market. So the terms here are brighter for these industries. But when we are talking about the top exports of the New Zealand, we also have remarkable products here, including fresh fruit, iron, steel, wood and its product. But New Zealand wanted to open up more for dairy products, fruit, wool and wine. But the problem here is dairy sector is one of the most sensitive sectors in our economy. And this understanding will help you to understand why domestic politics in New Zealand is targeting against this FTA. Now that we have a clear idea that what this FTA is about, let us understand what this aims to achieve. The current ambition of this FTA is to make this reach USD $5 billion within 5 years, and this is part of India's trajectory where it is trying to diversify its trade partners, where India has already signed 7 FTAs if we see last 5 years. Mauritius 2021, we have UAE 2022, we have Australia 2022, rest with EFTA, UK, Oman and now New Zealand are a significant progress in terms of export, where we will make our export not just competitive but also resilient to being dependent on traditional marketplaces. Now in this very context, let us also look into the main key provisions that are present in the FTA. First, what are the tariff commitments? For India, there is 100% duty-free access to New Zealand for all the Indian exports. For New Zealand, the tariff reductions on 95% of the exports. The major exclusions, if you talk about, they have been dairy and agriculture as well as meat products. These have been the major exclusions that have been made. That's why 95% of the exports have got tariff reduction from New Zealand. That means the products being exported from New Zealand to India, 95% of these products have got tariff reductions. There is another key provision related to services and mobility, because the temporary employment entry visa for Indian professionals has been brought into the scenario, where there will be provision of 5,000 visas at a time, and the duration through this particular visa would be for 3 years. So here we get 2 major enhancements. First, a huge market access to a wide range of products where we already had the tapping already, and second, we also mark our place in terms of where we want to become the global hub of services. We are the services provider. So here in that context, we have got services and mobility as well. Now that we have the basic understanding around the free trade agreement and what are the important key provisions, what it aims for, now let us go ahead and understand where is the opposition coming from. So the opposition is coming from the Foreign Minister of New Zealand, that is Winston Peters, and he has gone ahead and exclaimed this free trade agreement is neither free, not fair and also of low quality. Now this coming from a junior coalition partner, coming from a foreign minister here, and he has also gone ahead and vowed to oppose this FTA in the parliament. However, you have to see that this is not against India, it is against the terms of agreement that have been finalized, and this is also very much associated with the domestic political cost and the domestic political scenario that we get to see in New Zealand. Now let us move ahead and understand the core dispute which exists and if this can actually derail the FTA that is in front of us. So the core dispute lies around the dairy sector. The dairy sector is one of the main selling points of the exports in New Zealand. So when we are talking about dairy, you have to understand it is around $13 billion, $14 billion from in terms of exports for New Zealand. That means it is nearly 30% of total goods that New Zealand exports. In this we have milk, cheese, butter, all of this. And when this FTA was finalized, this becomes the first New Zealand FTA where dairy products are not included. That means the star export product of New Zealand has not been included. So this becomes the main reason of opposition and concern. But in this context, you have to understand also India's position, because when we are talking about India, India has dairy as a highly sensitive sector. Here we have 80 million small farmers which depend on this highly sensitive sector. If we make it a free space, we let the bigger players enter it, the one who would be struck the worst would be these farmers. So if we are going to expose our sensitive sector to New Zealand's large export oriented dairy industry, it will easily undermine the rural livelihoods and disrupt the cooperatives that exist. and we would not want that for our domestic economy. We want export destinations, we want market access, but we do not want to disrupt this. And as a result, this was a tough negotiation to make New Zealand exclude their star product. And that is why Winston Peter is highlighting it as a deal which is indefensible to NZ farmers, and this cannot be defended against them. There is another aspect associated with the opposition, that is about labor mobility and also immigration concerns. Because as we know, FTA has a visa pathway which is exclusively available for Indian professionals. Now in this context, this is something very generous that has been present as compared to Australia and UK FTAs that have been seen. And again, the foreign minister was objecting that this is going beyond trade into migration policy. FTA should be about trade. Why they are addressing migration policy? That means New Zealand might see increased Indian migration, and this will stress their labor markets. So these are the core issues that are being brought to fore by their foreign minister. But at the same point, when we talk about these issues, they have been part of the negotiations, they have been dealt with, they have been discussed with, and that's when FTA came out into the picture. So if we talk about that, will these issues derail this FTA? So it seems like an unlikely situation. But in this context, when we see New Zealand facing an economic slowdown, unemployment is rising, yes, politically in domestic arena, this could have some ripple effects and it might strain the economy of New Zealand as well. But when we are again talking about how this might derail FTA, there is limited possibility to it, because if we talk about New Zealand's first party, they only have 8 MPs in a 123 member parliament. The governing coalition is very stable, and even though the parliamentary approval is required for New Zealand for FTA, this will be expected to be signed because the governing coalition stands stable, and this will most likely get parliamentary approval in a year or two. So the dissent might exist, disapproval might exist, but derailing of a heavily negotiated, where 2 of the best minds and international diplomatic players have been sitting and negotiating, that derailment does not seem in the way as of now. Now on this note, this is my final conclusion, that there might be delay, there might be a lot of political bargaining and certain downsides that might be seen in New Zealand, but there is no collapse that we are expecting as of now. And in this context, experts have also gone ahead and said, yes, this deal is definitely an important framework that was important for bilateral cooperation, but this is not a breakthrough. We will get to see the breakthrough if the implementation takes place, if the businesses uptake and services and investment make an inflow. And this is a very classical example again, where India is not only diversifying trade partners, making FTAs, but also being selectively liberal, protecting the sensitive sectors, opening the strong ones, making the economy resilient, and still focusing on protection of sensitive sectors. Now on this note, I will be concluding. I'll be leaving you here with a practice question. You can put down the answers in the comment section. The answer of yesterday's question here is A. That was all from my side. Thank you so much.